And finally tonight, we turn back the clock to the 1820s when, legend has it, a college professor conducted electrical experiments on a corpse in downtown Knoxville.
WBIR 10 News reporter Jim Matheny has the story of East Tennessee's very own Dr. Frankenstein.
I keep seeing him as this really curious guy who just had to know.
This tombstone marks the end of Dr. Stephen Foster's life story. But that story eventually took on a life of its own.
The connection with Frankenstein, of course, is the thing that draws everybody in. He was extremely educated for the day. That's why they called him the learned Dr. Foster.
Stephen Foster was an ordained Presbyterian minister, a college professor, and briefly president of East Tennessee College, now the University of Tennessee.
And he was fascinated by science.
Tour guide Laura Still says it took another 33 years to dig up the skeletons in Dr. Foster's past when construction workers on Vine Street uncovered human remains.
And everybody was speculating about where this old skeleton could have come from.
The old retired sheriff told the paper he remembered exactly who was buried there, because he killed him. That spot was known as Gallows Hill, and it's where the sheriff hanged a couple of convicted killers in the 1820s.
He would put them on a wagon and put the noose around their neck attached to the gallows, and then he would run the wagon out from underneath them.
The newspaper in 1829 says a crowd perhaps never before equaled in Knoxville saw the convicted killers climb a wagon conveyed to Gallows Hill. One was an old man who murdered his wife with an axe. The other, a 23-year-old named James White, who killed the husband of his lover in Marion County.
He was a very young, handsome man. In fact, ladies in the crowd that attended every hanging in those days were weeping at the waste of such a perfect physical specimen.
At 2:20 that afternoon, the wagon beneath their feet rolled away, and both men were launched into eternity.
And the old man was buried right here on the spot, and that was the skeleton that the workers had turned up 40 years later.
But the newspaper in 1868 added some new shocking details to the story.
That perfect physical specimen, he was reloaded on the wagon, rushed down the hill to the church. That was the Second Presbyterian Church of Knoxville, which was near Market Square, where Dr. Foster was waiting with his battery. Dr. Foster closed and locked the doors of the church. Now the crowd, they went around to the side of the church where one of the men could see through the transom window. He said, "Dr. Foster's laid the body out on some sort of table now, and he's attaching something."
The article says the spy watched as the battery sent electricity coursing through the muscles of a fresh corpse.
The murderer moved. He breathed. Once, twice, 3 times.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
But unlike the story of Dr. Frankenstein, the paper said Foster never really wanted to bring this man back to life.
Dr. Foster cut off the current, ended the experiment. He only wanted to satisfy his own personal curiosity about the effect of electricity on a human body.
There are plenty of records about this execution and the life of Stephen Foster, but the only place you see anything about some Frankenstein experiment is this one newspaper article citing an unidentified source 40 years after the fact. As for Stephen Foster's own life, a fatal illness cut it short in 1835.
Foster was a young man when he died, only 36. So mysterious are thy ways, O Lord. It was in 1868.
As for Laura Still, she believes there's some truth in that old legend that continues to give the story a life of its own.
It's so interesting, it's so creepy, and yet it's so Knoxville. It really is a great Knoxville story.
In downtown Knoxville, Jim Matheny, WBIR 10 News.